most of us can't just put like $500,000 into the market at once. Instead, it has to be done through a continuous process. And the more you can build that into your business and your sort of expectations around income and everything like that, the better off you're going to be long term. And the sooner you can do that, the better.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Paycheck. I'm Paula Christine. So a couple weeks ago, we had Ryan come in and talk to us about his book, or really just about turning solo income into wealth. And he had mentioned that he had 3 ways to build wealth. So I brought him back to talk about those 3 ways. So welcome back, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Again, I love it.
You're welcome. Okay, so what are these 3 ways, and how can I be wealthy? And maybe next week? Will that work?
Yeah, it's not quite like that. No get rich quick schemes here. But essentially what it is taking the way that people can build wealth in America and using our income and self-employment to actually access those. And oftentimes...
Can I stop just for a second? It really doesn't have to do with self-employment. It could just be anybody, correct?
Anybody, yeah. But like when you're like, working for an organization, like there are things that they give you. A 401k is there. You're automatically signed up for the 401k. So it automatically becomes something that you're gonna start investing in. But when you work for yourself, you have to put it all on yourself. And most importantly, you have to sort of know where to go and what to do in order to do it, because there's no like guide necessarily out there for you. There's people like me, but like you have to know to like go there. Yeah. But and so really those 3 ways are investing in the markets, investing in business, and so like turning your, if it's an income business right now, into an asset that can be sold down the line, and then and or investing in real estate. And so I work with a lot of therapists, for example. And so one of the first things we're doing is figuring out how we can invest for retirement through sort of the markets and that. But then it's figuring out sort of who they are and what they feel comfortable with and what their risk tolerance is, and figuring out where else they can invest, whether it's growing that practice into a business or, buying commercial real estate so they can practice out of it and rent some of it, or some other sort of technique along those lines. But it's really about understanding the person, figuring out sort of how they would like to build wealth in that case.
I've talked to many people on this podcast over the last 2 years about the building wealth through real estate. And that's not that easy. No. It's not like you can take $10,000 and buy a property and start generating revenue.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And, you also have to think about sort of what type of real estate you're buying. So the reason I mentioned the therapist is because there's always like dreams of having their own sort of, room, right? Where they can like talk to people and potentially rent out the other rooms to other therapists or other similar activities. And yeah, it requires a lot of like money to be able to invest initially within it. It's not the first thing we do. Like investing in the markets, as much as we want to make it a very complicated thing, can be very uncomplicated. And as self-employed folks, you are already taking a lot of risk just by the nature of the way you work for a living. And where we don't necessarily want to take risk is in sort of your long-term retirement plan, because if we look at your entire risk portfolio, you're really high over here where you're creating a business. And so we don't necessarily want to be super risky over here. Instead, we want to, invest in really vanilla stuff. And so that we have those assets for down the line. But then once those things are in place and there's more room, that's when we may consider real estate, just because one, it can create some extra cash flow. That's always wonderful. And for me, the biggest thing is it creates like tax potential deductions through depreciation that we can take advantage of, especially as the business is growing, the practice is growing, or whatever. And obviously we have appreciation and things of that nature as well. So all of those 3 things combined, or 4 things combined, is really why we look to it. But again, it's not the first thing because of what you just described. It's not the easiest thing to get into.
So you're talking about building, them buying like a commercial building versus like a couple homes and renting them out?
It just depends on the person. Like some people, would prefer to do that, right? I have a client right now who's thinking she wants to move from where she lives to an area closer to a beach, and we're looking at sort of
Who
how
doesn't?
can she.
Who doesn't?
What's that?
Who
I know,
doesn't?
I know, I know. We're looking at how she could afford this, and one tactic she could do if she can find the down payment for the new home is keep the home that she currently has, begin renting it out, and then moving into this new home. And this is going to be very valuable for her because she hasn't done the things to build her asset base, over the years. And so this is a way to increase her asset base while also increasing her cash flow in a very like cost-effective way. But it's on her. Like, does she want to take on the task of being a landlord? And that's a personality question, and that's something I can't help her with in terms of like saying you absolutely should do this. It's sort of showing her the numbers and then seeing if and giving her a realistic perspective of what like life is like as a landlord, and then letting her kind of decide how she wants to
Yeah,
move forward.
a couple of years, no, it was earlier this year. I talked with a gentleman who specializes in real estate investing out of California. I'm drawing a blank on what his name was, but he talked about, because I asked him kind of the same question, and what he talked about was, so you buy your first home, and you buy it in a neighborhood that maybe is up and coming, and then you stay in there for a few years, and then you purchase another home and you rent out your first home, and then you do the same thing until you've gotten 3 homes. So then the first 2 homes are basically paying the expenses or the mortgage on your, because you're renting those first 2 homes, then it's paying the mortgage payment on your third home. And then eventually, everything's paid off. And then you've got that recurring income stream from your other 2 pieces of real estate. So it's kind of basically what you were just talking about.
It's definitely a tactic, right?
Makes a heck of a lot of sense, because I wish I'd have done that when I was owned my first house, because I think I paid $30,000 for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know when you bought your first house,
A long time ago.
With the way the real estate market is now, it's hard to like find like a low down payment type of thing, because that's the hurdle, right? You have to have the cash in order to then buy your second house, because you're not getting what most people do, which is selling their first house and then using that cash to then buy the second house. And we also have to evaluate like interest rates. These are all the things that we have to evaluate. And so the purpose of like pointing this out to like the self-employed is not so they immediately run out and do one of these strategies, but it's to sort of help them educate themselves on these strategies, because we get so like tunnel focused about our business that we forget these other things that we should be doing, could be doing. And then when we reach a certain point where we either the business doesn't grow quite as effectively as we hoped, or just get tired of it, I mean, get very like worn down from it, then we're looking for the opportunity. But at that point, that's a bad time, because like now we're looking for a quick fix type of situation, as opposed to what wealth building really is like a series of continual steps done continually. Like like that's really what wealth building is. And so we need to make sure we're planning for it right at the beginning.
Okay, so talk about that. Steps, whatever you said, steps continually, or whatever that was.
Continuous steps done continually. Yeah, I mean, it's just like think about sort of saving for retirement. It's not picking the right stock and hoping that it like shoots up 5,000%. It's more continual setting aside certain amount of savings month in, month out over years, because you're using the tools of investment that are given to us. One, compound interest. Two, the fact that gains aren't taxed until you take them out. And so those two benefits combined, we can see real returns over time. And so, but the only way we do that, we can't just, most of us can't just put like $500,000 into the market at once. Instead, it has to be done through a continuous process. And the more you can build that into your business and your sort of expectations around income and everything like that, the better off you're going to be long term. And the sooner you can do that, the better.
Yeah, if we all would have started when we were 16 and we had our first job.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
We'd probably all be millionaires right now. So
I know. Yeah, I totally have some of that money left. Sure.
instead, we were buying cars and clothes and all the things that aren't any important now when we'd rather have the money.
I mean, I was buying CDs probably at the time. So like, there you go. That's how valuable that was.
Yeah, I know. You think about all the money that you've wasted over the years, only because I think a lot of it is that we didn't listen to our parents. I mean, there's probably a few that did, or they got it young enough to realize how compounding works. But most of us, our priorities weren't there. We got married young and had children, and you got to pay yourself first, no matter what situation you're in, and the sooner the better.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask people is sort of like what financial education they had growing up.
Zero.
And yeah, it's the answer is always 0 to none. And I'm always like, yeah, I had one eighth grade class where they taught us to write a check or trade an individual stock,
Yeah.
neither of which I do on a regular basis, unless my client has a individual stock or something that I have to do something with. Also, I would say that a lot of families don't talk about money, as much as it's like a taboo subject even within the family unit. And the more that becomes like done on a regular basis, the better off we'll be as sort of a societal unit as well down the line. But the fact that someone didn't have or didn't realize these things when they're like 23 is really not their fault. And I always am really trying to like tell clients like the fact that you didn't know to invest or how to invest, that is not unusual. That is not surprising. It is how most of us are. The only reason I do is my job, my life kind of swerved me in that direction. And other people go for all sorts of things. Maybe your parents did talk about money. And so you were very aware of it from an early age, but so many of us weren't. And so it's all about fixing what we can fix now and it's doing what we can do now as opposed to sort of what if type of thing is really where I try to focus like clients' perspective and whatnot.
Yeah, because it's never too late. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why like we were talking before we started this podcast about the course that I designed,
Mhm.
that goes through, your money mindset all the way through estate planning. And, it's a small investment, but if you finish the course, by the end of it, you're going to know what took me, I'm not going to tell my age, but it's up there, years
Sure.
to learn and to develop by just educating yourself continuously and just making it a point to look for resources and then implement them, because you can do anything. You can sit and watch my whole course, but if you never do anything, it isn't going to matter. So it's putting what you've learned into practice.
Absolutely. And often when people come to my door, like they have taken a big step because they're very shamed. They're shameful of their finances. They have a lot of shame around it, and so even accepting like a call with me for like 20 minutes just to like introduce myself, hear a little bit about my services, and see if we can work together is such a big step for them because of that wall that has been built over the years. And so, yeah, however, sort of you're getting that advice, courses like that, or on even online tools, like understand that nervousness you're feeling is probably
We've
we're all
all been
feeling it.
there.
We've all felt it.
Yeah, we've
Exactly.
all felt
Yeah.
it. I mean, I grew up with, parents that didn't manage money well. I didn't manage money well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it took me years to figure it out. And I think a lot of it has to do with, well, it's your mindset, and shame is one of those things that affects your mindset. And to be honest with you, nobody really gives a shit. This is where
That's
you
true.
are today in your life.
Yeah.
And, kudos for reaching out and getting help instead of just sitting there, being shameful in a corner and doing nothing. And now you're, 70 years old and you're working. I hate to say it, but that term we've all used as a Walmart greeter, because I don't
Mhm.
want to degrade anybody but that, nobody wants to be 70, 80 years old and still working,
Or being forced to work.
forced to
Because
work.
like I have clients who want to work until they can no longer work, until like they're practically on their deathbed. And I am always like, that is great. I want that for you, but I don't want you to be forced to work at that age, because it's a lot different to say you want to work until you're 85 and then at, 80 or 79 needing a hip replacement or undergoing chemotherapy or some other sort of health concern, and also, by the way, have to like do an hourly session because you have to pay the bills. Like, that is not the same thing, and those are two completely different scenarios. And so, the sooner that you sort of take those first steps is going to be it's going to be better for you. And luckily, a lot of self-employed folks are aware of these things. They're knowledgeable, they're curious, and so they understand that they want these things. They don't always understand sort of how to get started or whatnot, but at least there's an initial sort of curiosity that just naturally comes with self-employment. So you have like a characteristic that's really important in that process.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that most people are aware. They just,
Yeah.
business owners or self-employed, doesn't matter. They're aware, but I think it really goes down to, afraid to ask, afraid to
Mhm.
someone to say, hey, you screwed up or whatever, which I've, in my career, I've never ever said that to someone. I'm like, the past is the past and let's move forward and let's figure it out. And, you're just by coming in and just by talking to someone, you're making the right step, the first step to changing your whole life.
Mhm.
And it really
Yeah, and
does change your whole life.
I always like to point out as well that like there's this like perception that of where you want to be in life, and there's where you are, right? But where you are actually wanting to be in life was never going to happen. No one ever reaches that pinnacle of whatever. It's like the
I
horizon.
don't know.
You can't reach it. I guarantee you that even billionaires, whatever billionaire you're thinking of, they still sit back and they like, oh gosh, I wish I did this, or I wish I
Oh,
did
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I would
And
agree with that. But I think you can get to a point where you're happy.
oh yes, that's different. But I'm just talking about sort of like if everything went perfect. Instead, here is where you are. But if you look back, you see all that you've gained so far, and focusing on that and then figuring out sort of the best ways to move forward can be really valuable. It can be really energizing, because even if you're in a really tough situation, at least you're like energized and can kind of find the positives in the situation, and then get the right help to you know
Yeah,
mend that gap a little bit.
I agree with that. I think our past is just learning lessons that got
Hmm.
us to where we are today. And if you've learned through those lessons, then you'll take what you've learned and move forward and have the positive attitude and the right mindset. And I say manifest it all the way because you can get it. Everybody, I believe, in my world, and sometimes people tell me I'm perfect Paula living in the perfect world, which is I am not. Trust me, I have struggles like everybody else, but I always believe that there's a positive outcome that comes from just you know having the right attitude and mindset.
Yeah, I have a very similar mindset actually, and sometimes I have to work on it. It's not
Oh
like an
no,
every
trust me, I had to
day
work on it a lot.
thing.
I've moved. I've been working on it a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And but like I was a writer for many years, and I got really burnt out of it, got really tired of it, and it felt like I wasn't like growing as a person. And that's when I found what I do now, and I absolutely love what I do now, and it's created some of that optimism and that encouragement. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to have made the switch if it wasn't for the things that we talked about. If I wasn't investing in outside of my writing business, I wouldn't have had the flexibility to make the switch when I did, because
Yeah.
mid career change is not an easy thing to do. So
No,
yeah.
it's not. No, it's not. But I think if you just have a plan and follow that plan and be flexible, knowing that that plan's gonna hit some curveballs and you're just gonna have to adapt and move forward. But positivity is the whole thing. Like if you get negative, like my daughter texted me, she was working on a paper on Saturday or Sunday, and she turned it in, and she didn't do well on the paper. And I'm like, it's okay. It's just, 10 points of your grade. Don't worry about it. Just stay positive and you'll figure it out the next time and you'll do better.
Yeah. And then it's like what you're talking about, then, seeking help and finding like the tactics to do better as well. Yeah.
I think that's where most people fail in life, is that they get discouraged and they won't reach out for help. And I always say, ask for whatever you need, even if it's something silly, like, I don't know. I just like ask forever, everything. Like, and people are like, you shouldn't ask for that. And I'm like, why? You never know. They might say yes. And most of the time people do say yes.
Even like, so because, there's a financial firm behind my name, like I'll get people reaching out to me being like, hey, I'm dealing with this really tough financial situation, and they're not in a position to pay for my services. And I wouldn't force that on them because I don't want to be a burden to anyone that's like a client of mine in any sort of way. But because they've reached out, I'm going to find them like ways to find help, like whether it's a free service or a lower fee service. Like we're going to find ways to get them help because they've reached out. And it's not like we're like looking to reject anyone that comes by. We want to provide them help. And so like most people are like that. So even if you reach out and they're not the right type of person, they're still going to like a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people are going to help.
Most people will help you.
Yeah, guide you.
I think that we started to talk about 3 ways to build wealth, and we've come into asking for help as the conversation.
Hey, whatever. It's fine.
It's so funny. I like, people always say, well, can I have questions? I'll be like, okay, you can have them, but I don't know that we're necessarily going to get to them, because this is really, the conversation is, just sharing your knowledge and my knowledge, and finding, hopefully inspiring someone who doesn't feel really good about their financial situation to reach out for help. So If somebody does want to reach out for help, Ryan, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can find me at thinkingcapfinancial.com. And then Paula has the link to the ebook that we've referenced. So, it'll be in the show notes, it sounds like. So you can access it there, and I'll send it along.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. And if anybody wants to check out my course, you can check it out at paulachristine.com. That website again is paulachristine.com. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.